But policymakers and the European Commission have an important role to play in simplifying the business environment for green industry. But it is also important to convince people to switch to green vehicles as quickly as possible. Sales of new cars have fallen sharply, 18.3% fewer than in the same period last year. As for electric cars, sales are stagnant in Europe, but growing globally.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now, this video might be a little bit unsettling for some. We are going to take a closer look at how activism and the push for the EV mandate has intersected with recent turbulence in the auto industry. I am not sure if YouTube will push this, but people are losing their jobs out there now because of a handful of activists. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe if you like what you see, and if you have to leave before the end of this particular video, give us a thumbs up. The algorithm will really appreciate it. Let's get into our very first feature video from Euronews. Take a look at this.
Volkswagen has just announced the closure of 3 plants in Germany, while Audi will stop production at a factory in Belgium. The European automotive sector seems to be in crisis. But the German industry sees itself in a transition period with a switch to electric cars. This comes, however, at a high cost, as EV car production requires fewer employees overall than in the past. According to a new study, the transformation of the German automotive industry could lead to 186,000 job losses over the next 10 years, and a quarter of those have already been lost. The German Association of the Automotive Industry thinks that other jobs will be created, but this requires to work on competitiveness.
In the future, the location side, the attractiveness of the location side decides where investments are made and where future jobs will be established. Yes, there will be jobs that won't be needed that much anymore, but with the digital era and everything concerning software, but also the electric mobility itself, of course, there will be a lot of new jobs created. So we need to make sure that Europe, that Germany has the attractiveness, the competitiveness, that the investments are made here.
According to German car makers, the key to this is cheaper energy, which is 4 times more expensive in Europe than in China and the United States.
So you know what all the problems are, but yet still you're going full speed ahead. And as mentioned, many automakers, including Ford, Stellantis, and GM, have announced major cost-cutting measures, including layoffs and plant shutdowns, as they shift from traditional vehicles to EVs. Stellantis and GM recently offered buyouts to thousands of salaried workers, with similar moves from Ford, reflecting attempts to streamline operations for the EV shift. Stellantis expect to shed around 6,400 workers as part of this transition, and this was just late last year. Let's continue.
On the other hand, they disagree with the European tariffs on electric cars made in China that have just entered into force. But according to the NGO Clean Transport, the new tariffs will give the sector breathing space during the switch.
The tariffs will not change the entire dynamics completely. Maybe instead of importing those electric vehicles from China, we will see a lot more factories here in Europe where Chinese manufacturers are producing those vehicles locally, which can also be good news for Europe. In terms of pricing, there might be indeed some short-term effects where maybe there's less vehicles available very short term, for example, or the prices are a bit higher. But generally, it's very hard to say because it really depends on the pricing strategies of Chinese car makers, and a lot of them have very comfortable profit margins.
According to the
China is the only one benefiting right now, because look at recently, even Ford faced setback at its Rouge electric vehicle center, which is expected to halt production of the Ford F-150 Lightning until next year due to supply chain and financial issues related to EV production. VW, on the other hand, and other brands are also facing similar delays like what you're seeing now, slowing down EV production despite mounting regulatory pressure to deliver zero-emission vehicles. Now you're talking about shutting down 3 factories. That's a big blow to the automotive sector and to Germany's economy overall. Let's finish up this first video.
Expert policymakers and the European Commission have an important role to play in simplifying the business environment for green industry. But it is also important to convince people to switch to green vehicles as quickly as possible. Sales of new cars have fallen sharply, 18.3% fewer than in the same period last year. As for electric cars, sales are stagnant in Europe, but growing globally.
And this was when the news just broke. I'm going to show you another video of what transpired after, but even Toyota took a notable cautious approach, balancing investments in EVs with ongoing production of hybrids and internal combustion engines. The company saw, that's Toyota, they saw hybrids as a more feasible bridge technology, while uncertainties in battery cost, production infrastructure and consumer demand make full-scale EV transition risky for them. And this approach may shield Toyota from immediate layoffs, although it raises the risk of regulatory penalties in markets pushing hard for EV mandates. But lately, their CEO, Toyota CEO, came out and admitted that going full-on EVs, full-on electric vehicles, will result in mass job losses affecting Japan's entire economy. Now, the big question, did activism cause this shift? Is activism still viable, or going full on EVs was just another knee-jerk reaction to people who made the most noise? Let's take a note from veteran journalist John Stossel, who did a super splendid video to explain this, what I'm trying to portray to you right now. We will just watch about the first 2.5 minutes and come back. I will leave the link to the full video in the description box below. Shout out to John. Take a look at this.
Activists say our future is dismal.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
Because I don't have a future.
If it's not climate change, it's homophobia.
It's very stressful, like people don't know whether we're going to have rights next year or not.
The activists say they fight to save people from homophobia, racism, hate groups, and climate change. Listening to them, you'd think these threats are getting worse. But the opposite is true. Our air and water are cleaner. We live longer, healthier lives. There's less racism than there used to be. Less homophobia, too. But if the protesters acknowledge that, what would they do with their lives? Journalist John Tierney covered activists for years.
In 1979, I was a reporter at the Washington Star, and I was assigned to cover the first anti-nuclear march.
Thousands protested nuclear power.
An end to the nuclear age in its entirety.
And I interviewed the organizers, and I was just struck that all of them were veterans of the anti-war movement. How did they all suddenly become so passionate and so knowledgeable about nuclear power? And then it was later I realized, well, of course, the Vietnam War was over. You know, they succeeded, so they needed to find a new cause. For activists, success is a threat. You know, it's going to put you out of business unless you find a new cause.
But it's not a business. They're not making money doing this.
Oh, yes, they are.
Environmental activists probably collect the most. Their leaders pay themselves hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. Racial equity groups have gotten...
I'm just going to pause it right there, but thank you, John. This opened a lot of my senses, and I hope this video will also open your eyes as to what is taking place now in the automotive sector. And here she is right now. I've done pieces on her, Greta Thunberg. I've done pieces on her in the past and how she was actually used, but she's young. She wouldn't understand how she was actually used as the face of the activism to actually spur and started the EV mandate. Not calling her out on it, but a lot of times we're ignorant to the fact of what is taking place. But now imagine a mechanic getting a call at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning to go out and help someone in distress. Some mechanics, believe it or not, act like emergency essential workers. So do tow truck drivers in the wee hours of the morning, giving help to a catastrophic accident or something horrible that has happened on the roads. Thanks to activists, we will never understand this. We have done more harm than good lately. Action comes with consequences. Now we have US and European automakers now trying to get around production and economic obstacles clearly as a result of political interference, giving way to China becoming a major player in the EV space. Companies like BYD and NIO pushing aggressively into global markets. Chinese automakers benefit from domestic subsidies, lower labor costs, and fewer regulatory hurdles, which position them to fill the gaps as Western automakers currently struggle to scale EV operations. Concerns are now rife about job security in regions heavily reliant on traditional automotive manufacturing. This is now unfolding in the US, Germany, and soon Japan is next. Take a look at this. And shout out to the Manila Times for providing this video. And these are German workers, VW workers, assembling outside the plant, demonstrating basically on what is currently happening over there in their industry. Now, the transition to EVs has generated uncertainty for thousands of workers, especially in union heavy sectors. We saw UAW strikes across Stellantis, GM, and Ford, and they were partly fueled by the concerns over the future of labor in an EV dominated market, which they want to push, where the need for labor intensive assembly lines will actually shrink. We all knew this, and this tension highlights the broader challenge of balancing regulatory goals with the immediate need for significant labor force. Plus, full automation is now here. The EV mandate, while aimed at environmental progress, has added substantial pressure on the traditional automakers to keep up, with significant financial and labor implications happening. And this ongoing shift is reshaping not only the automotive market, but also the livelihoods of workers whose family will be affected and seeing their industry transformed by regulatory mandates and global competition. In the end, we will always find ways to survive. Unfortunately, we will be taxed for that as well. As usual, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to grab a copy of my ebook, The Parts Manager Guide. Please smash that like button on your way out. It will only take you 1.5 seconds to do so. Until next time.